Hi everybody, my name is Jo and I love to read. Welcome to my November and December 2021 reading wrap up. So this is going to be a bit different. Well, it's probably going to be the same as a traditional wrap up, but in the sense that I finished all of one book, and aside from that I haven't really even finished. I forgot nearly that I'd finished that book because it was so long ago in November, and I have just been not finishing anything else, which is fine. But it was a different wrap up than what you expect, because most booktubers do finish a lot of books within the month, but I have just had a lot of I've just had the one personal circumstance, i.e. being pregnant, going on that has prevented me from reading as much as I normally do. But by sort of booktube standards, I am a bit of a slow reader. If you are feeling a little bit bad about your reading and things like that, please don't. If you don't normally read a lot of books during the year, if you compare yourself to someone else who reads hundreds of books during the year, I could probably never hope to get above 50. My biggest reading year was 42, and that was back when I went to high school. I didn't have a lot of exams going on, my parents cooked my dinner, I didn't have a job. It's just not sustainable for me to be reading lots of books, but I am still a booktuber, I still put out worthwhile content, and I have not finished one book in December, and I finished one book in November. Just any reading is good, so just feel happy knowing that. And I just wanted to also say that, especially with goals and end of year videos coming up where people are listing the amount of books that they read in a year, I know can make some people feel a bit bad, so don't if you have, because any reading is good reading. And if you want more on this topic, then Ashley from Bookish Realm has a really great video about this that I'll link down below. She did it as part of her Vlogmas, and she just goes into a discussion with this as well that was just really fantastic. Let me get into the wrap up. The first book that I finished in November, I don't really have any dates, or these are just all rough approximations because I actually stopped updating on the StoryGraph too, so all my data is pretty minimal. I'm missing stuff for the end of the year, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I just did what I needed to do to survive these couple of months. The first book I ended up finishing was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which is the first obviously in the Harry Potter series, and that I did it on Illustrated. Did I say that in the title as well? I reread the Illustrated book because I was having a really hard time struggling with reading, especially with a pregnancy, and I was kind of reading a lot of books that, combined with not having a lot of energy / not feeling well enough to read, and then reading books that I wasn't enjoying, it made me feel like reading was a horrible task that I didn't enjoy doing. I was very slumpy, so when I jumped onto Harry Potter, I knew that it was something that for me is still a book that I find enjoyable and really easy to read. It did take me a while to actually push through and finish it because I DNF'd a lot of stuff in October, the month before, and I just really wanted to prove to myself that I could finish something, that I just needed to get it done. And even though I'd kind of felt like it did its purpose, I was still hadn't finished anything in a month. So I really just wanted to keep reading it while I was enjoying it and get it done. So that felt like it took a long time, but it served its purpose, and that was really good. Got me finishing a book again, which felt fantastic. I then jumped onto a book that I borrowed from my mum called Once I Was a Princess by Jacqueline Glitzy. I did end up DNFing this one, and I feel like a bit bad for my reason because it's a memoir, and I hate saying that someone's life is boring, but I got bored. Truth be told, I did. I made it probably about a third of the way in, or even a quarter, and I decided to DNF it because I was just not enjoying it. I would encourage people to pick it up if it sounds interesting for them. It's a memoir, so it's a true story about a Aussie woman who met and fell in love with a man from another culture than hers while she was still in Australia, and when she goes over to meet his family, she ends up finding out that he is a Malaysian prince in high society, and it is an absolute culture shock for her, and it just details the years over being married to him and how isolating it felt and how different it was because he was this one person over in Australia, and then when they would go back he changed when he was around his family. Hey everybody, it's Editing Jo here with bad lighting and wet hair, but I was really not happy with the way that I described this book so far in this clip as I was editing it, so I just wanted to jump in here and talk about the book a little bit more because I do think that it is worthwhile to be reading it, and maybe it's just my inexperience with memoirs as to why I didn't find it very interesting, and it also, or not that I didn't find it interesting, that I got bored enough to put it down. And I think it also shows the time of my life that I was going through as well, that I was a bit more impatient. So potentially if I had have been reading it at a different time when I was less busy in personal life, then it would have been fine. So I'm going to actually tell you guys the most of actually what is a more accurate description, a more interesting description. Jacqueline herself was raised in an abusive situation. Her mum had, I can't remember whether it was diagnosed or not, but her mum had a mental disorder or a mental illness that prevented her from being a very good mum. She picked a horrible partner who ended up being a pedophile and tried lots of times to abuse Jacqueline. She did have a grandmother in her life who was a good influence, but for whatever reason Jacqueline never seems to spend the majority of her time with her grandmother. I would feel like for me it would make more sense for her to have moved in with her grandma because she was like a solid good person in her life, but she doesn't, and maybe also because she doesn't really open up to her grandmother all that much. The man that she ends up marrying, though, the prince that the book is about, she meets him over in Australia, but she's also very young when they first start dating. I think she's only about 17 or 19 or something like that, so she's very young, very inexperienced in love, and also coming from a home life where she doesn't actually get to see a good depiction of love. And he's very romantic at first, and as any young girl, let alone someone who has a past like this, Jacqueline is absolutely swept away with all the ways that he romances her. They have a normal Western relationship where they've slept together before marriage and everything like this, but they go for this holiday overseas and meet his family in Malaysia, and there's all these rules and restrictions and things like this, but you kind of get the sense to begin with that there's rules and restrictions with the family, the older members of the family, but then there's his cousins, the younger ones, and his siblings that when they get to the city they can sort of let loose and they start wearing all these designer clothes that are a bit more, I don't want to say skimpy because that's like a negative connotation word, but that are a bit more revealing, I suppose, less fabric than the traditional stuff that they wear around their older relatives. So you kind of maybe think, you get this sense that like things are a little bit different when you're around your older relatives, but maybe it will be okay. So the part that I sort of stopped reading after is he kind of actually forces her into agreeing to marry him. So after she goes over for this family holiday, she didn't actually realise that it's kind of almost a precursor to whether she's acceptable for the prince to marry. And then because they've been sort of dating for so long, and I guess his parents have put the hard word on him or something like that, when they go back to Australia this second time he proposes. And Jacqueline is actually a bit hesitant after this trip, but also just, you know, she's getting a couple of red flags even in her sort of inexperience. But he pretty much just turns around and is like, if you don't marry me, then we're done, we're over, like, you're crazy if you don't, and all this kind of stuff. And not coming from like a very good background and not having done a lot of work on herself to have good self-esteem or whatever it is that would make her go, no, you're being an arsehole, you shouldn't treat me this way, she agrees to marry him. And then the wedding, I did read the wedding ceremony when they're over in their country, but I didn't really read anything past that, and I don't know why exactly. I was just feeling like maybe Jacqueline's writing I wasn't engaging with or something like that, but I think it is a really interesting book, and I don't know obviously what else happened after that to say how long they stayed in his country for, or whether they came back to Australia, and what exactly the abuse was that he did while they were married. But if any of that sounds interesting for you, then pick this book up, because that is just the beginning and there is that whole big part to go. And I hope this was a bit better. I seem to be back in the I don't know how to describe books mode again, and I was just editing my video going, this is not good enough, so I'm going to insert this clip. But now let's get back to the actual recorded wrap up. I think it might be more of a me thing than anything. My mum really enjoyed it. She's kept it for like 10 years more because she really enjoyed it and read the sequel, so give it a go. I think this is just a me thing. Something brief that I will mention is that I still haven't picked up Countries of the World's in Minutes by Jacob F. Field again. I did talk about this briefly in October because I had started it but then stopped. It's kind of something that I'm reading like in between other things, or just kind of picking it up every now and then on the side in like a separate reading session, because it's just this little book that's got like a page of information and then a map on every different recognized country of the world. Something that I'm reading more non-fiction to try and expand and to learn a bit more about the world, because I do not know a lot at all. And I haven't picked it up at all during November or December, because I just didn't feel like I had the capacity even just to do my normal reading, as opposed to adding something on top. It's sitting on my bedside table. I keep looking at it guiltily every night going, why don't you just read a page a night? So maybe I'll try and do that in this new year now. And then the final book that I'm going to briefly mention is my current read at the moment, but I have been reading it for at least the end of November. This is where I don't have a lot of records. But the entire December, I have been reading Royal Assassin, which is the second book in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I am enjoying every minute and word of this book. Nothing to fault it as to why it's taking me so long to read it. It is just my lifestyle at the moment, and whenever I pick it up, it's really enjoyable. I'm just taking so long because I'm only getting in like 6 pages a day, and it's a big book, so that's why. But I'm really enjoying being in the world with Fitz again, with his found family. I've never really kind of understood the found family trope as much as when I'm reading this book. Also probably because at the moment I'm having like a bit of family drama. Nothing too crazy, but it doesn't feel great, and probably like having that going on at the moment whilst also reading about someone who has a found family kind of makes me like understand it a bit more in a way that I never did, because personally I hadn't really experienced that, because I've always had like a really great relationship with my family. So that is it for my November and my December wrap up this year. Hopefully in January I'll have finished Royal Assassin and I will have a bit more of detail to give you guys and tell you how I felt reading the entire book. I don't know if I will get anything else read in January, because my plan is to then jump onto Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, which is chunky, as you can see there. So I don't know if I have the capacity to finish Royal Assassin as well, because I've still got like 2/3 to go, and then also read the chunky Midnight Sun, so we'll see. Thanks everybody so much for continuing to follow my channel. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video.